Hi everyone, and welcome back to That UFO Podcast. My name is Andy, and this is your UFO news update for, let's just call it, the middle of September 2025. I'm recording this on a bit of a special day for me. It is the book's release day, the book that you've been hearing me banging on about now for months and months, I'm sure it seems like. But Atlas of UFOs is finally available in the UK, the USA. It's the UK release date today on the 18th of September, and of course all across Europe and the rest of the world, unless you're in Australia, New Zealand. Sorry about that, it's December. But yeah, so just very quickly, if you'll give me just a moment, thanks to those who have received their copies and sent me email or tagged me on socials. I'd love to see pictures of it across the world. The book itself is wonderfully presented. I'm really proud of it, and it's one you can definitely share with your friends. So check out Atlas of UFOs. The link is in the description or on screen if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you've ordered online, especially on Amazon, please leave a review. It really does make a difference. I mean, ideally a 5-star review, because 1 stars are a bit shitty, but hopefully you've liked it and you can leave a 5-star review. So big thank you to everyone who's checked out my David Marler interview, nearly 2 hours. There's bonus content at the end of that if you're on the paid feeds as well. And remember, if you want to support the podcast and myself directly, then you can do that on Apple by subscribing and trying a 2 weeks free trial. You get no adverts, all that kind of stuff, early access. Patreon has a free trial, or you can search That UFO Podcast Premium on Spotify. If you're more of the visual kind, then YouTube memberships are only a couple of your local currency, and all support is massively appreciated either way. But listen, on to the news, and a lot of stuff to talk about, some really weird stuff too, which is definitely going to require some follow-up shows, I think. And where else to start than the recent hearings fallout, and nowhere better than with Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp's latest Weaponized podcast. Of course, George Knapp was one of the witnesses providing testimony at the hearing. For me, George was fantastic, and as always, I'd recommend anyone checks out the show themselves, this Weaponized episode, especially when I'm commenting on it. But here are some highlights from the Weaponized podcast, which follow up on some of the things from the hearings, but also give us a little bit of an indication, or a big indication, where things may be going in the very, very near future. On the show, they were joined by Jeff Nusatelli, Alexandro Wiggins and Matthew Brown. Now, 2 of those, of course, were witnesses, Jeff and Alexandro, at the hearing, and we hear again from whistleblower Matthew Brown as to why he wasn't at the hearing, and if indeed he could have been. Knapp said, and I'll go through some of the highlights, folks, like I say, really good show. Knapp said that they know people want first-hand witnesses. They want people who have handled bodies, handled biologics, that have been involved with craft and legacy programs, but it's very, very difficult to get those people to come forward. And remember, part of this hearing, the whole whistleblower protections and transparency, is to try and help that happen in the future. Jeremy Corbell had said that others had gone through the process to try and testify, but ultimately couldn't testify publicly, but did so behind closed doors. He says we're going to hear from them soon, one of them sooner than the others. So that sounds really good, that we are going to get another whistleblower coming forward, I imagine, via the Weaponized platform. We did hear Jeremy and George say that others have recorded interviews with them already, and if they didn't testify, they would hopefully bring those forward. We found out Dylan Borland, who testified, only found out 6 days before the hearing he was cleared to testify. You know, that's a hell of a short run-up, isn't it, to think what you're going to be doing, what you're going to be saying in that high-pressure situation. And Dylan Borland was fantastic. I'd love to speak to Mr. Borland myself. If you remember, Dylan Borland spoke about his own sighting on the military base of a huge craft, triangular, interference with his phone, and he spoke so well. So well done to Dylan Borland. Marek von Remenkamp jumped on. He was a guest with myself a few months ago, and he done some analysis on the video, the very controversial video for some, or for many, I think, on either side of it, of the Hellfire missile hitting the object. And he does clear up to say any analysis he is giving is preliminary, and he does say this could be debunked at any time. You know, it could turn out to be something prosaic, and I think that's a fair context to give to any analysis. He does say that, you know, I think he does lean on the video being something anomalous. He indicates a few interesting things within the video. I'm still, if I'm on the fence, folks, I'm sitting leaning to the side that it's still something prosaic. My worry is people have gone so hard and so fast on this video being anomalous without a lot of really good reason. If it is debunked, that can be damaging. And I think you've got to be careful of putting too many eggs in a basket. I did put Marek in touch with S, the anonymous guest I had on the podcast, doing the analysis on the object and not the video, because S wasn't an expert in video analysis. He says that much. He's an expert in the weaponry and the missile. And I put Marek in touch with S, and I'm really happy to do that. I wish more experts would work together and not in silo, making their own conclusions. And we've seen so many folks, especially online, telling you what this is. I would rather folks gave their opinion as to what it may or may not be, but you need these people working together to have those discussions, have that debate, and work using different expertise to kind of come down on the side of what this might be. So that's still where I am with that, folks. Corbell says he knows there's a total of 5 minutes more footage of that video, including the object still going on, the other objects trailing behind it. He says the video is labelled UAP, and one of the tags on it is marsupial. A marsupial is an animal that carries its young inside, such as a kangaroo, animal inside the pouch. So the video's label indicates that the objects may come from inside the larger object. I don't know, folks. Again, for me, it still looks like the missile goes through, whatever it is, and yeah, but who knows? I'd like to see that, again, more folks coming forward to discuss it and really push this forward. Corbell says we need to push to get more of this type of footage out in the extended version, but look at the gimbal footage. How many years has that been out now? And we've never been any closer, I don't think, to getting the extended version where the object shoots off at incredible speeds. It's always that thing, isn't it, with these leaked videos, that they're just interesting enough, but they leave off the really interesting stuff for us to see that really could nail down that this is something truly anomalous, which is disappointing. But yeah, I agree with Jeremy. We need to try and get this kind of stuff out, and hopefully they can do something to either way find out the rest of the footage. Definitely some interesting questions. It would clear up either way why they fired an expensive missile in that area over what may be a targeting practice at potentially a type of balloon, why there were two drones already in the area, one filming from above, one out to intercept an object. Does that indicate there was a practice going on and they were just happened to be there? Did they know there was a UAP coming ahead of time? A lot of questions still to be asked on that one. But I need to file that video away, I think, in the meantime, as a who knows, until we get more information. Corbell was talking to Alexandra Wiggins, who is active duty and the first active duty serviceman to testify. He says to Wiggins that 20 different people were called to come forward as witnesses to events at sea as part of the Navy. Most didn't want to come forward still. Knapp and Corbell thought Matthew Brown would testify. He did go through the vetting process, and I'm going to quote here, because of politics and dynamics, he wasn't called to testify this time, but he does hope Matthew Brown will testify at a future hearing. We see Matthew Brown give an update to say that his home recently was broken into while he was sleeping, and the folks were there long enough for them to know that, they were in the house for a while, which is really horrible, and, it's upsetting to hear that is happening. What I'm hopeful for here is that we do get momentum kept up from this hearing. I think it's fair to say we don't know the impact publicly, because so quickly after the hearing finished, and that real quality testimony that happened from all of the witnesses, it was kind of lost afterwards in the news cycle because of the Charlie Kirk shooting. And it's really hard to judge what, if any, media reach the story was going to have and how far it would go, because I think across the world, especially in the US, and I know in the UK, the media cycle was dominated by what happened in Utah. So really difficult to find out what the impact may or may not have been for the hearings going forward. But I'd love to hear from your thoughts or comments below, or via email or thatufopodcast.com/contact, and let me know what you're expecting going forward, with more information from whistleblowers said to be coming forward from Jeremy Corbell very, very soon. I imagine it's going to be something dropped on the Weaponized platform. So yeah, good, and thank you to Jeremy and George for still following this up. I'm going to share some thoughts from you before I move on to some other news stories on the hearings fallout, folks. So thank you to everyone who got in touch. So C. Beckett said George was great, Jeremy fidgeting behind him was awful, and as far as the video, now we know it was a dead drop and no context, it's just a distraction. Getting weary of the trust me bro, and I've got secret shysters giving us, keep giving us Diana, Avi, Dr. Nolan, David Marler, regular folks stories, less Valley Girl. Yeah, I get what you're getting at there, I appreciate it. Shelley said, I liked the hearing. George Knapp did a great job, and I like how he was just himself, very authentic. I was so mad about that poor fourth guy being out of a job. That burns me up. The first gentleman was also great, listing the 3 things he wanted accomplished. Also great of the Navy to have 2 second testifiers back to back. Last, I have to say I am not excited by photographs or video. Easy to be anything. And that's not an unfair point at the end there, Shelley, definitely. Moni Cortez, I'm waiting for the promised subpoenas to be delivered, and there is an update on that, and I'm going to give you that soon. Great panel of witnesses being born and raised in Vegas. I am a big fan of Knapp. The whistleblowers need protection yesterday. Ms. Luna did a good job. I want the video to be real, but shame on the person pushing it forward at this important hearing if not. And that's the thing for me. I would be really happy for this video to have come out on a podcasting platform, not at the hearing. I think at least that way, if it does get debunked, there's not an impact that would tarnish the testimony either way. And if it's not debunked, fantastic, we've got a really good video. KR said we need to focus on the testimony of Borland and Knapp, enough with the video. Reed Summers, and Reed's going to be a guest on the podcast real soon, say he's got the brilliant Emergent podcast himself. He said, I would say the video is just one of the top 5 impactful insights from the hearing, but on the video, I think it's the implication that matters most. UAP appearing in military sensitive and contested airspace as recent as last October, that military is targeting them with top-line arsenal, and that potentially those weapons are ineffective in downing these craft or objects. That implication corroborates recent claims of UAP shootdowns and escalates the political optics considerably. Reed, of course, I'm guessing there you're leaning on the side of this being something anomalous, and I'm looking forward to chatting to Reed about that too. Dahlia said, the video is wild, but I've basically seen nothing about it in days. With everything going on in the US, it's just been not being paid attention to at all. Perhaps that's just my awful algorithm. Dahlia, I'm in the same boat as you, though. I think events that preceded the hearing took over, and I think that's a wider point that's happened over time, and it's certainly not a conspiracy to interfere with the hearing. I'm not saying that at all. However, there are things that come up in the news cycle that just happen to, pardon the pun, trump the UFO news with the public, and it's happened. The Amber Heard Johnny Depp story certainly done that at one point, didn't it? The Human Neutrino said the video was pretty interesting. To me, when it zoomed out after impact, the object seems to be travelling in the opposite direction of the waves below. This would mean it's going against the wind and couldn't be a balloon. Happy to be corrected, as I ain't a video expert. The witnesses were stellar, and that really added a lot of global context to the phenomena. Lisa said, we seem to be creeping ever closer inch by inch. It's an echo chamber. I want to see the mainstream media actually reporting on this, asking questions, applying critical thinking, making it a topic of discussion. I've been watching and reading since the 90s, and it's time for a change. What does it take to make this stuff real, valid, relevant? And Javier says, I think the video is epic, or Xavier, sorry, Bertolino. I reject any debunking of it. I'm not usually such a mark, but something about the close-up Nat posted the other night popped me. Yep, all fair. And those were all Patreon comments, folks. Some YouTube comments on the hearings and the fallout. JD said, I thought Luna was great, but I'm still annoyed at the video being presented without being checked first properly. These people have a responsibility. Neb said, better than expected. I worry about the fallout from the new video once it's acknowledged as prosaic. Ginger Hipster, great name. Said the international community should come together and sanction key individuals and organisations operating within the US government, and there should be some sort of trial at the International Criminal Court over this. The US can't be relied on to navigate this successfully and ethically. The fact that an elected official inserted an attempt at obfuscation and misinformation into the record clearly highlights this. I don't doubt he was well intended in putting that video out there. I just think it proves he can't be effective. Thank you to everyone. There were loads more comments, but I'd be here all day and want to try and keep these relatively short in terms of podcasting format. I know I tend to go well over an hour. But yeah, if you like that and you want to hear more thoughts, I'll definitely include them, folks. So thank you for those. Yeah, so good stuff from the Weaponized crew, of course. Let me know your thoughts. The Brazil hearings happened, folks, on the 16th of September. What Brazil hearings? Some of you may be saying. Well, there were hearings held in Brazil on the topic of UFOs. There is a video available online, which has been transcribed into English, which is fantastic. And what I'll do is give you a kind of rundown of what was said at the hearing. So, the recent hearings were held in Brazil's Chamber of Deputies. They weren't just about lights in the sky. They tied UFOs directly to democracy, transparency, and national sovereignty. For context, folks, Brazil has a huge history in this topic, and I would say, is it unfair to say outside of the US, it potentially has a history probably second behind the USA in terms of what's happened. You know, back in 1977, the Air Force launched Operation Prato, which was Operation Plate, Operation Saucer, after terrified residents in Para reported glowing craft beaming lights down on them. People were injured, strange burns and puncture wounds were reported, hundreds of photos and documents were created, but to this day, researchers insist the most sensitive evidence, at least 15 minutes of film, is still locked away. Then in 1986, we had what is still called the official Night of UFOs. Wonderful name for an incident. More than 20 objects were detected on radar over Sao Paulo and Rio. Fighter jets were scrambled. Pilots confirmed the objects performed impossible manoeuvres. And here's one of the key things, folks. The Air Force commander went on record admitting the phenomena were real but unexplained. And then, of course, a decade later from that, 1996 brought us the Virginia incident. Witnesses described strange beings captured by the military after a reported crash of an object. 3 young women, hospital staff, and even military police came forward. One soldier, Marco Eli Cherez, reportedly handled a creature and died shortly after. The official explanation? That the witnesses had mistaken a disabled man known locally as Modinho, but investigators say photos and videos exist of non-human beings and have been kept secret for over 30 years. All of this sits against the backdrop of Brazil's freedom of information law, which in theory should have opened the vaults. We know James Fox, director, has the Virginia incident, and I believe there is a director's cut coming out with more footage from that. Moment of Contact is a fantastic documentary, and James himself is trying to track down the footage of the alleged being. Many researchers believe the most critical cases, like Virginia and the full Operation Plate or Saucer film, remain hidden. That's a little bit of background on that. So the 2025 hearing, which happened on the 16th of September, the Chamber of Deputies took the extraordinary step, folks, of holding a public hearing on UFOs, transparency, and the freedom of information law. Now, I'm going to read this off a revised transcription from the hearing because I don't speak Portuguese, Brazilian. So, yeah, apologies for that. I barely speak English, as you folks listening or watching know. The session was chaired by Deputy Chico Alencar, who framed the debate this way. Democracy is the regime of transparency. There should be no secrets. Denying access to UFO data is denying citizenship. Let's look at some of the main players. Some of these names may be familiar to you. Tiago Tichetti, editor of Revista UFO, he compared Brazil's position to the United States. He pointed to the Congressional hearings there, where whistleblowers like David Grush have testified about secret government recovery programs. Tichetti told deputies, when we say UFO, it does not automatically mean extraterrestrial. If it's determined to be ET, it ceases to be a UFO. Denying access to UAP data is denying citizenship. Society has the right to know the truth. Vittorio Pachaccini, one of the original investigators of Virginia, went further. He declared there is documentation, yes, of the Virginia incident. Those beings passed through the hospital. They were transferred and removed in a secret national security operation. There are videos. There are photographs. The military hold this material. Nearly 30 years have passed, and Brazilians and people worldwide are waiting to access this information. Really, really good statement, that. Marco Antonio Petit, who is the president of the Brazilian Committee of Ufologists, added a sovereignty angle. He claimed in 1996 virtually everything related to Virginia was handed to the US, compromising Brazil's national sovereignty. And Fernando Ramalho, Vice President of the committee, focused on the broken FOIA process. So FOIA is the Freedom of Information Act. He explained how requests for UFO records are routinely denied, something the Black Vault's John Greenwald will attest to. Officials simply declare material does not exist, and legally that presumption blocks further appeal. That is our structural problem. He said only a direct order from the presidency could unlock the archives. And finally, Lala Barreto, a ufologist with a background in anthropology, gave a broader perspective. She said, ufology's importance is undeniable. Even if we were only to discover life as simple as bacteria, don't hide it from us. We are studying this too. And that's an interesting comment. Just look at last week. We had NASA come out to say that one of the samples they have from the Mars rover, Perseverance, I believe it was, looks like indeed it shows proof of ancient microbial life on Mars. Once that's out there, folks, and once they've more or less confirmed it. They say more studies need to be done, but they've been studying this for a year with their scientists claiming that they can't see anything other than this being potential proof of life. Once that's out there, that's the can of worms opened for me. And publicly, I think that's bigger than even these hearings and what these can accomplish, because once you have mainstream science telling you we've found proof of life once being there, if it was once there, it could still be in multiple places now, and will likely be in places all over. So I'm really excited about those types of announcements. And if you think personally things like NASA holding stuff back, if NASA do come out and claim something like that and really announce it to the public, that will be huge for the UFO topic. I really do think so. There has been some pushback and criticism, of course, of the hearing in Brazil. Not everyone welcomed the session. Critics in the scientific community have called it a circus. One science communicator, Sergio Sacchini, even quipped, "God have mercy on this country." Another attendee mocked the panel by wearing an aluminium hat. That's really disappointing. I hate that whole look. But Deputy Alan Carr defended the process, reminding the chamber that this wasn't about chasing aliens, it was about citizens' rights to transparency. So on that, folks, I'm hoping to get some folks who were either involved at the hearing or know a lot about the Brazilian processes. So hang fire on that and I'll report back. The hearing ended with a pledge to forward all questions and evidence to the Ministry of Defence there and to escalate the issue to the Civil House and ultimately the presidency. What does this mean? On one level, it's showing Brazil is following the global trend we have seen in the US, Japan and elsewhere, taking the UFO subject out of the shadows and into the halls of government. On the other, it reopens the central wounds of Brazil's UFO history and the secrecy around Operation Saucer, the unanswered questions of the night of UFOs, and of course the enduring mystery of Virginia, which James Fox is still ploughing the fields of, almost literally, to get the more information out there. So, yeah, and as Pagini put it during the hearing, attempts to intimidate or silence Brazilian ufology did not work. Living under the yoke of fear is not an option. So, yeah, really interesting stuff. Your thoughts on the hearings from Brazil, if you've watched those, if you're a listener who speaks that native language and has watched those hearings, I'd love to know, is there any nuances that we've potentially missed out on as well? Really good to see that pressure still being implied, and well done to the people of Brazil for doing so. Askapol, another bit of news. Askapol UAP. Matt Laszlo got a bit of a scoop from Representative Eric Burleson. This harks back to something I mentioned earlier about subpoenas going out potentially. So Burleson confirmed that 4 agencies have received interrogatories from Congress about UFOs. And here's what that means to break it down. I had to look up again what interrogatories are. They are formal written questions sent by congressional committees to agencies designed to compel specific detailed answers. They create a written record that's harder to wiggle round than verbal testimony, and haven't we seen a lot of wiggling done around the wording of questions and whatnot. So why they're going to be used in a UFO context. So Congress, particularly members like Burleson who sit on oversight, want direct, unambiguous answers about what different parts of government know or are doing regarding UAP. Verbal testimony in hearings we have seen can be vague or evasive. Interrogatories force precision. Who's got them? Well, Burleson confirmed to Matt Laszlo that at least 4 agencies received these written questions. They haven't been named, but you could surmise the Department of Defence, Department of Justice, intelligence agencies, NASA, all could be included within that. What kind of questions could be there? So you could have examples like, list all programmes under your authority since 1945 that investigated UAP. provide the names and dates of contractors or subcontractors engaged in UAP reverse engineering, identify any recovered materials, vehicles or biological evidence related to UAP, provide all reports shared with or received from other agencies regarding UAP since... Insert your date here, folks. Those are just some examples that I've checked out online. It could be asked and would make sense. The significance of this, however, are interrogatories are harder to dodge, like I say, than hearing questions. Answers are still under oath, written, and can be used later if contradiction arise in testimony. In UFO investigations, that's critical, as we know, because it forces agencies to go on record with specifics. So, in plain terms, Burleson confirming this means Congress has escalated past casual hearings, and is now using a legal-style tool to box agencies in on UFO questions. Really intriguing stuff, and well done them for still pursuing this, regardless of any issues people may have around how it's happening, mistakes being made, people being too eager or keen. You can't say that things aren't happening on that, folks. And one last news item from me, speaking of things, let's talk about a really weird story that's been making the rounds lately. The so-called Panama alien species allegedly growing from a meteorite, if you have seen this. And this all started really weirdly on TikTok when a user posting as Kin Panama shared videos claiming a small meteorite had landed near him. According to the clips, the rock began to ooze and sprout a strange tentacled mass, almost like something out of a sci-fi movie. People comparing it to like Venom from the Spider-Man series or The Thing. The videos went viral and have sparked worldwide debate. Millions of views on these, folks. So it certainly caught the imagination. Now, what is going on here? No one seems to know. However, there are a few potential explanations. First, the fungus theory. So several biologists and nature writers have pointed out the growth looks like and behaves like a stinkhorn fungi, specifically a species called Clathrus archeri, also known as devil's fingers. These fungi start as an egg-like sac, then erupt into bright tentacle-shaped arms covered in a foul-smelling spore slime. That's one possibility. Potentially not alien, just a terrestrial mushroom doing its thing. Second, a material science angle, and I saw this on Reddit when I was trying to do some research on it. It could be a silicone polymer, something like PDMS that has been soaked in solvent. When the solvent evaporates, the material can swell and contract in uneven ways, creating a jerky, organic-like motion. It could give the illusion of a living, breathing organism when really it's just chemistry and polymers. A third explanation is it's a hoax. Debunkers, of course, on YouTube and Reddit have flagged inconsistencies in the video. Things like the rock looking spray-painted, missing earlier footage, some videos being deleted that were there before that aren't now. Put together, a lot of people conclude it could be staged. We don't know. There is a fourth option, and it's something genuinely alien, but there's nothing more I can add to that, is there really? It's went viral. I imagine if this kid did have something alien, and it reminded me a lot of the movie Evolution. If you have not seen Evolution with David Duchovny, wonderful, love it, great movie. Go and watch it, fantastic. Take the leg is a great line, and you'll know what I mean if you've seen it. There's no peer-reviewed analysis, no lab results, no scientific verification here. No one's coming forward with a real sample tested by a geology lab or a mycologist. Without that, we can't confirm it's even a meteorite or the growth is biological, let alone ET. What does it mean? Who knows at the minute. I imagine it'll be explained in due course. Perhaps you're happy with those explanations already. Perhaps you're a scientist yourself and know what you're looking at there. But yeah, I suppose it's one of those things, if it's really, really genuinely weird, you'd have thought it would have been taken off them by now. But who knows. Again, I'd be interested in your thoughts. Comment below would be great. Or send me something over via email or the contact form on the website. And one last little thing, actually. Matthew McConaughey, the actor, was discussing UFOs on the latest Joe Rogan podcast, and that was pretty cool to see, talking about studies being done by Harold Putoff and co, where they concluded, you may know this, that disclosure could result in more negatives than positives with governmental and religious upheaval. Cool to see it being discussed outside of what you'd expect the normal UFO discussion, and that for me is a tiny little bit of progress that for me is a good thing to see. And that is all for this update, folks. Make sure you check out my interview, like I say, with the brilliant David Marler. I've got interviews in the pipeline with Reed Summers from Emergent, the Emergent podcast, director Dean Aliotto on part 2 of this Alien Perspective documentary, and some other names I've confirmed for the coming weeks, which I will announce real soon. And as always, if you're listening, watching, liking, subscribing, all the stuff you do is massively appreciated. If you can leave a 5-star review on the platform you listen to, like Spotify, Apple, like and subscribe on YouTube, would be massive. Leaving comments in the main video, all is a massive boost. Just take a few seconds, it would be great. And a final plug, you can officially now get my book. It's just there, folks, and receive it within a few days. Atlas of UFOs is out now and in bookstores around the world. Unless you're one of those folks like some of my family down in Australia, New Zealand, etc., then it's December. But a great Christmas gift. And for me, I will speak to you all very, very soon.